Hey, what's up YouTube? In this video, I want to talk about my background, just so you guys kind of get a feel for where I come from and what I'm about. I know a lot of people kind of wonder that. I know when I watch other YouTube channels and follow guys that are doing different builds and buying and selling cars, and I kind of want to know, how are they doing it? How can they afford it? How do they make it work? What do they do to be able to afford the hobby and move forward in the hobby? So, a little background about me. I'm 37 years old, live in Oklahoma, and I've got a couple of kiddos and a wife. I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, 7-year-old girl and a 3-year-old little boy, and they keep me busy. So the time I get with the car isn't a lot. They keep, family activities, the kids' activities, they keep me pretty busy. So, I started out when I was a teenager. My first car was a 76 K5 Blazer 4x4. It was a hand-me-down from my granddad. And it had some issues, obviously, as an old car probably likely would at that time. It was kind of rusted out on some spots, and it was just a nice car. It was a nice gesture for my grandparents to give it to me. About 2 years I drove the car. My friends at the time all had pickups. They all had, one good buddy of mine had a short wide Chevy, a 90, 91 model, and another buddy of mine had an old Dodge truck. And at the time, I knew what they had in their vehicles and how much they had spent to buy them. And I thought, well, I can't really afford to buy a truck, because I figured the Blazer was only worth a couple grand. And at the time, 15 and a half, working as a busboy at El Chico, that was my first job, and I didn't really know what direction I wanted to go with the vehicle until I met the girl I was kind of talking to at the time. I ended up meeting her dad, and he was an old gearhead, muscle car type. He was really into Pontiacs. He's really into, early 70s Trans Ams, Corvettes, things like that, just the classic muscle cars. And he kind of steered me into getting into, that idea and that scene. I ended up selling the Blazer and wanted an early 70s Camaro. But I just couldn't find any at the time for what I had to play with. I only had I figured I was gonna have a couple grand. I think I sold the Blazer for $1,800, and then I had saved some money up. I think I had like $2,500 at the time to buy a car, and I looked all over everywhere. I remember that summer, I was shopping around for all summer long. Right when I sold that Blazer, I hit the Auto Trader, and I'm looking through the ads, and there's tons, looking back on it, I still have that Auto Trader. There's tons of cars that nowadays it's unbelievable how much they've gone up. This would have been the summer of 97, I guess going into 98. The car I ended up buying was a 79 Camaro, and it's all I could afford at the time. And it was similar, obviously, to an early 70s car. I like the nose on the early 70s car, and I like the four taillights, circular taillights on those cars. But at the time, the 79 is all I could do. My friend's dad, he helped me a lot with the car, kind of helped me from, figuring out why it wasn't running right, helping me learn to tune a carburetor, adjust the weights on the distributor, things like that. I had the Turbo 350 rebuilt, and it got me around okay. It was a 350 car with a Turbo 350. Put a set of headers on it, some long tubes, and then I did 373 gears in that factory 10 bolt and an Eaton Posi. It had an open one-tire fryer setup on it when I got it. So it was a 241 gear, I think, from the factory. It was terrible. Highway gears were awesome, but with a 3-speed, but it was a dog, and it felt like the gears would just run forever per gear, and it wasn't making a whole lot of power, so the gears felt real long. So after that, driving down the road one day, and the balancer just falls off. The harmonic balancer, crank pulley, fell off the snout of the crank snout broke. Apparently he coiled it, and it didn't hold, and it just busted off. So smoke, oil everywhere. I'm dead in the water, obviously. The thing's not going to run with no balancer on it. So I ended up towing it to my parents' house. By this time, I'm probably, 17 and a half, almost 18, about to graduate. I ended up getting as much as I could together, and I remember getting a small loan from my granddad to cover the difference. And I built a 383 stroker motor out of the 350 block I had. So basically, we pulled the motor out, I found a 400 crank, bought a set of Vortec heads. They were hot back then. That was the thing to go to. This is, right before the LS stuff got real popular. I ended up building the 383. It made I think we dynoed. It made 340, 350 to the tire with 420 pound-feet of torque. It ran hard, made good torque for what it was for back in the day. And best I ever ran out of that car was I think it went 1270s, 1260s at, I think it only went 107, 108. I had a 28-inch tire in the back that it didn't really need. It wasn't making that much power. I ended up doing a 700 R4 for it, so an overdrive, basically a 4L60, pre-4L60. Still had that 373 gear 10 bolt in it, and it was a solid car. We straightened it out, was pretty clean to begin with, but just filled in some dings. Had the car painted. I ended up selling it. I sold it 2 or 3 years later, so I had that car for probably 4 or 5 years. It's the longest I've ever had one of these, hot rod. Typically I'll have them for 2 or 3 years at the most. I'll get tired of them and I'll sell them. I had a 95 Firebird Formula. That was my daily. It was an LT1 car, and it was fun. And I realized back then that I liked the feel and the seat placement of the 4th gens better than what I had in that 2nd gen car. So I sold the Camaro and I sold the Formula at about the same time. And I bought my first LS car was in 2005. I bought a 99 Z28. It was a pewter, gorgeous car, 48,000 miles, pewter T-top Z28. It had a mild 228, 230 Futrol F11 cam in it, stock heads. I think it had an LS1 intake when I bought it. Yeah, I remember I put an LS6 intake on it. It had a 4400 TCI converter in it, which sounds huge, but it worked really well. It also had 373 gears in it. Some mild suspension stuff, and that thing hauled. It hauled the mail. It went 1170s at 113, 114 with that F11 cam. I put an LS6 intake on. I think it picked up a 10th, maybe. I went out to the local casino. My girlfriend at the time ended up marrying her later, my wife. Her mom was big into going out to the local casino. So went out there with her, got lucky one night, won $700, and I bought myself a set of heads. I had some money to throw down to buy some of the PRC Stage 1 LS6 heads. Had a buddy spec a cam that was basically a T-Rex cam. It was a 242, 248, 615-ish lift, 110 LSA plus 2, I think, 2 degrees of advance. So it was, it ran hard. And the peak torque was earlier for a T-Rex cam, that style cam, but it still turned 6,600 RPM. But that setup went 1150s, 60s, higher mile an hour, 119 in the heat. And that was on a summer night. So anyway, from that car, I had sold that car. I bought an 02 Z06. I enjoyed it. I ended up proposing to my wife and realized I had to kind of buckle down. Those payments were too high, along with paying for a ring. So the Corvette I only owned for 3 or 4 months. It was an Electron Blue Z06, really pretty car. It was lower, it had long tubes. Didn't really get very far with that because the payments were just too high at the time. It was, this was back in 2006, 2007. This was 2006. And I just couldn't afford the payments on it. It was a 4-year-old car, and I think I paid $30,000 for it. So anyway, by then I'd moved out. I was in a duplex, so I didn't really have the money to throw around for that and pay for other things that were coming up. So after that, I ended up selling that Corvette. I bought a 98 Z28. It was a heads cam car when I bought it. It was a little bit rough. The tune needed some work. but it had some good parts in it. So that's what I always kind of look for when I'm buying the 4th gen. By then, I knew my way around them. I knew what worked and what didn't. And I knew that I could take them apart and make money if I wanted to. So, you know, I drove that car like it was. I put a Wolf roll bar in it. Had a buddy work on the tune a little bit. Put some good tire on it. I think I put a Mickey Thompson ET Street Radial is what it was at the time, the original series, on a 15-inch wheel.
So my car's I'll get that first. Oh, you're I can't wait to
That car went, you know, mid-11s also. Most of them went around 1170s, 1180s, making what they're making. And most of those cars, the pewter car ended up making like we think it was 432, 398, I think, torque. 432 horse, 398 torque. And the red car, that red 98 Z28 made like 420 tire and like 370 torque. It was a Magic Stick 3-cam car, so it was a little bit peaky, but it ran pretty hard. It had a 3500 converter, so it did 60 foot as well. I think it went 1180s. So I got tired of being in the 11s. I wanted to go faster, so that was my first kind of dive into doing a full build. The motor in that LS1 was forged, it had forged internals. So I ended up taking that motor, pulling the motor out, got a different converter that would work well with boost, and I ended up buying a high flow turbo kit. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those or not, but High Flow was around early on. Like I said, this is like 07, 08, and High Flow had come out a year or two before that. They promised a bunch of guys on LS1 Tech some kits, and then they never delivered. So I got one of like 4, maybe half a dozen kits that actually showed up and were complete. I bought it from a guy that's on LS1 Tech still. His name is screen name is Turbo LS1 SS. I think he's out of like New York, maybe somewhere up there, somewhere back east. I got everything that was in his car that ran really hard. I think his made like 750 tire with a 6-speed. So that was 15 pounds on a 6-liter. So I was expecting the car to make pretty good power. So I get that car all together. Had some issues with it holding boost and making boost. I think it made like 8 pounds, and I was running 91 octane and no methanol. So I was afraid, at the time, that was kind of early on, and I was afraid, you know, more boost would potentially, you know, could injure the thing. So I wanted it to last. I wanted it to be you know, make good power on the street. So it ended up making like 500 tire, 550 tire, and like the same torque. So it ran 11 teens at like 125. That was with a Vigilante locked up triple disc converter. I think it was a 342 geared 10 volt that was in the thing, and it didn't really 60 well that well. I think it 60'd the 1.6s, 1.7s. It was okay. So from that car, you know, I took a little bit of a break. We bought a house. 6 months or so later, I ended up buying blue 98. There's a 98 turbo Trans Am. It was built by that same shop that helped me tune here, Brett at XP Racing. He did it. Before Brett took that over, it was Extreme Performance is what it was called, and a couple other guys built this Trans Am I bought. But it was a 348 LS1, had a T70 turbo on it. It made, I don't remember, I think it made like 550 to the tire, and then I ended up kind of tinkering some things and tuning it and spraying more methanol on it, and it made like 620 tire through a 6-speed. That car was fast. It went door to door with a car that went 1080s at like 131. So I knew the car was fast. It started having issues with third and fourth. It was grinding third and fourth. And, you know, I've always liked automatics for the drag strip, but, you know, you can't beat a 6-speed on the street just because it's so much fun. It's just, there's more to do. With a turbo, I realized that, you know, at the time I liked a converter better with a turbo. I didn't have the money or really want to spend the money to try and make the 6-speed work because I was afraid it was going to have issues again. So I ended up buying a 4L80 that was a used deal that came out of a truck. Bought a converter for it that was used. You got to be careful when you buy used parts. I buy and sell used parts all the time. Usually I'm selling used parts. You get people that tell you that, yeah, this is what it is and this is how it worked. Well, every combination is different. And I ended up finding out that really the transmission worked, but it wasn't optimum. It was a manual valve body, a Ford manual valve body. At the time, a 98 couldn't be controlled by the computer. I think now there's changes where it can, but I just didn't want to put up with a manual valve body all the time. It got old real quick. Few months and it already annoyed me. Had converter drain back issues, so you kill the car, leave it overnight, you come back in the morning and the converter wouldn't have any fluid in it. You drive out of the neighborhood and it would get hot quick. It's like the converter would seem real loose and then it would tighten up. It's just unpredictable and strange. So anyway, that car had a bunch of issues. I ended up selling it. Took a break for a little bit. I had a couple of cars in between it that were heads cam cars that I didn't really go anywhere with. It was just something to kind of fill the void of having something. And then I realized, I didn't really need the cars. So I took a break for a solid year and a half where I didn't have any car at all, just a daily. And I kind of realized that, as much as I'm into these cars, they're not me. They're not my identity. They're not really what I'm made of. I was so into cars at a younger age that I felt like my sense of like belonging and being involved in a group and like a group of friends was about the cars. And really, that's not it at all. It's about the camaraderie and the fun you have, and it just happens to be with the cars because that's the common interest. So I took a step back, kind of learned more about myself and what I wanted in life, and got more into the family thing. And fast forward to a buddy of mine, he'll be on the channel. His car is an LS powered, but it's a pretty cool car. It's actually a 94 Mustang GT that I actually used to own that I sold him years ago. Good buddy of mine, I've known him all my life, and he's putting together like an autocross / road race build with his Mustang. And like I said, I'll feature it. It's a really cool car, what he's done with that. And he's a machinist, he knows ins and outs of everything car, so he's fun to chat with. But anyway, so I got more into the idea of doing something autocross and road race because he was going in that route, that way. And I kind of got out of the drag racing scene. It's a bug and it'll always be there. Especially when I'd sold the blue Trans Am, and then I ended up buying it back right before I bought this Firebird. And I ended up, I got tired of it again. It was having similar issues as it had before. This time it ended up being an issue with, it was something simple. It was the filter, the weird right angle pipe right off the blower, or the turbo rather, and it was crunching down under boost, and it felt like I was having fuel cut. So I changed the fuel pumps out, and it still just didn't work right. It was just acting kind of screwy. So I ended up selling that car when I saw the 1LE for sale, the Firebird that I have now that I'm building for the, it's kind of the focus of this channel, at least to start with. And so I told myself at the time, buy this car and enjoy it, because this is what you ultimately want forever. This will be the forever car. And to me, that's really what it's all about. The 1LE is a special car. They didn't make very many of them. It still has AC, and I'm going to keep it on the car, but the crank windows are kind of a pain sometimes. But really, that's the only thing that bothered me. I like, building cars that can kind of do anything. I've kind of come to that realization over time that it's a lot of fun to build a drag car, drag-oriented car, but you really want to do it for your true self-enjoyment. Don't build a car unless you're going to build a drag car to literally race it all the time. Because to me, if you're not racing it every weekend, if you don't have that time in your life to do that, it's not worth it. Build the car for you. Build the car for what you want to use it for. And where I am in my life right now is enjoying it on the way to work, home from work, occasionally on the weekends, going out with friends occasionally. A lot of other life going on where I can't really, build a car for drag and build a car for autocross and build a car, that's a street car and just directly, really fast drag car. It's just not where I'm at. So this car, I want to do it all in. It's not going to be super competitive at anything, but it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun at everything. So, it may not be able to go around a road course more than a couple laps. It may get too hot. I'll find out. I want to autocross it. It surely can't do worse than it did from the factory. It was intended, from the factory to be an autocross car. It's a factory race car, which I think is super cool. So that alone is kind of my purpose for the build, is to, most people say street car isn't a drag car and just fast and go straight. I want to go fast with everything. I want to be able to take the car out and do anything in it all the time. This build and everything involved hopefully won't cost a lot. I'm not looking to spend a bunch of money. I'm trying to do it as frugally as possible, if that's a word. I bought a car to take parts off of it, and then I put it back to stock and sold it. I do that a lot. I've done it on a couple cars. I bought a car with a blower on it, fairly cheap, sold the car and didn't really lose out a lot. So it works out well. You just got to be, if you know the cars well enough, you're not afraid to turn a wrench, it's not too hard. So a lot of it, just dive in. I'm not a trained mechanic, but I'll get in there and try, and I've got lots of friends that can help if I need it, and it's really the main thing is just make sure it's fun. My goal is to work an hour in the morning every morning during the week, and maybe catch a few hours on the weekend. So the channel will be ongoing in between Steps of the Firebird. I'll try and fill in the voids with other videos, local things going on. I hope you guys enjoy the channel. Just a little bit of insight on me. Take care.